Here we're gonna have a review of the Ikko OH10, the original one. I know the 10S is out, and hopefully I can get a set soon. But for now, we're gonna review the original and have a massive comparison with a bunch of other IEMs that you will see in the title of the video. But for now, we're gonna do Ikko OH10. We're gonna review the Ikko OH10 first, because actually now you can pick these up for around $100, $110 if you look in the right spots. I'm gonna try to link the cheapest I can find it in the description. And yeah, let's get into this. So, I bought these used myself personally, not when it was $100. And so I have the cable, which is a joke, a complete joke. This is just sad. This is trash, like actually useless. This thing, what is this? This feels cheap. I mean, okay, so let's take out the cable tie out. All right, it feels like it was made to be tangled. Like, on purpose. This feels like some kind of sick joke. It is very thin and light, which at least that's nice, but it's just, this is trash. This is trash. It's very cheap feeling. It feels like a plastic. It's just, it's terrible. It's terrible. You have to buy a separate cable. You can't use that. You can't use that. No. Okay. Tips. Come with 2 sets. Very comfortable set of IEMs, I will say. Ergonomically, they are shaped very nicely, and they're very well built and very heavy, but in the hand only, not in your ears. I don't know what they did, but it feels in my ears like a normal IEM's weight, but when I'm holding it in my hand, this feels genuinely heavy for its size. Like, it reminds me a lot of the Tanshim Oxygen, where it doesn't feel like aluminum or something like that. It feels like a stainless steel. The oxygen is stainless steel. I couldn't find out what metal this was made of, but I don't know. It's very nice quality though. Feels excellent and also is very comfortable when you put this in your ear. I use spin fits on a lot of my amps, if you know from the channel, and I didn't have to when I used these tips. These tips are actually more comfortable than the spin fits were, but yeah, we'll talk about that in the sound in a second. Also gonna say it came with, for some reason, a MMCX removal tool. And no, this is not because I bought it used. It literally has Ikko written on it. So, and also of course a cleaner on the end. So, yeah, that's that. Let's get that out of the way. So let's talk about the sound differences between the tips before we get into sound differences with the other IEMs. Also, I want to say this red indicator, very nice. Glad they have that. Makes it easier. Anyway, and also it has this little like a obsidian pattern, like a fractal pattern. Looks cool. I like how these look, and I love the fit and the feel. Overall, great package. Now, let's talk about sound between the 2 tips. Overall, with both tips, I'm gonna say it is a brighter IEM, and it is fatiguing for me. I know a lot of people probably don't have that fatiguing issue because they're not as sensitive to sibilants as I am. I wouldn't call these very sibilant, but they're fatiguing. Especially with these tips, they're thinner to me and more fatiguing. With these tips, they have more body to them, but it's still a little bit thin. But it has more body with these. Less soundstage than these, but still, this has an excellent soundstage. I'd say it's above average in this price range in the current market. Keep in mind, these came out a while ago, but I'm talking about in comparison to current market. It has a great stage, and imaging is good. It actually has excellent imaging. Now, I will say, for a Basshead IEM, it actually doesn't have the quantity of bass I expected, but in a good way for me. I actually like the amount of bass these have. It's excellent quality bass, very detailed, good texture, great punch, and it has a good amount that doesn't overwhelm the track, but it still has a good emphasis to it. The highs can be a little peaky for me, as I said, and the upper mid-range I am not a fan of. It's a little bit on the thinner side to me than even the rest. When I already said it's a little bit thin. It's got a peakiness in certain parts of the frequency range. I can't really pick up where, but that it just feels uneven on some songs. And for example, I'm gonna say right now, before the comparisons, I was like, A-Bing with the Rinko on track, and I'm listening to the track on this, and I know that a certain part of the track is gonna peak a little bit, and then I switched to Rinko, and on the Rinko, I'm expecting that peak because I'm so, listening to it over and over again. I'm like, oh wait, I'm using the Rinko right now. I'm not gonna have that peak. I'm not having the issue. So it was a little bit annoying for me. It wasn't necessarily a deal breaker at all, but I didn't like that. So for the majority of my testing, after testing A being with these tips, I did these ones. And the spin fits sound like these ones. So if you're wondering and you wanted to use spin fits, they sound like these tips pretty much. So not a big difference between these and spin fits, but it does not sound like these ones. Okay, so that's enough on just the OH10. I'm probably going to timestamp this part right now. This is where we go to the comparisons. I brought here the 7 Hertz Legato, $110. I brought the Kiwi Ears Quartet, $110 also. I brought the Hexa, which I'll explain in a second. I know it's not a Basshead iem, but we'll talk about that in a second. This is $80. And we have the Rinko, which is also $110. So a lot of $110 IEMs here. Now, I'm going to be all over the place because this is a lot of IEMs to compare, but bear with me. I'm also going to try to make them visible with the lighting. I don't know. Okay, so compared to the Rinko. Let's compare the Rinko first. Now, this is a brighter set, on the brighter end. The Rinko is the opposite. It's a warmer set, darker set. Now, it's warmer and darker, I mean. So, it's got more body to the vocals, it's got like a more rolled off treble than the OH10. I'd say detail-wise, you have more detail overall in the track on the OH10. The OH10 has good detail for the price, I'd say. I'd say the bass detail-wise, like bass texture, the Ikko is a little bit better. But I'd say the bass texture on the Rinko is still really good. So I wouldn't say that like that's a reason to go over this. I think that when it comes to these two, it's what do you want in terms of warm IM or brighter IM? And also if you want detail in the rest of the track, more detail will be found on these. But if you want more full-bodied sound, you're going to want the Rinko. There's also a wider stage by far on the Ikko. You're not getting a very wide stage on the Rinko. For me personally, I prefer the Rinko, but that's my personal taste. I know a lot of people are going to prefer the Ikko. And of course, build quality-wise, the Ikko is better as well, as this is plastic and I think either resin or plastic on the other side. Now, let's compare with the Quartet. And I will be comparing these to each other as well a little bit throughout the comparisons. But compared to the Quartet. The Quartet is a more fun sound and is warmer than this. It's not an extremely warm sound and it's not dark. This is a darker set than the Quartet. The Quartet has a warmer sound but doesn't lean on as much on the dark side, darker sounding side, where you still get, I think, more highs on the Quartet than the Rinko, but you get more highs on the Ikko. I think that this is one of the lesser detailed. The Quartet is one of the lesser detailed of the whole set of IEMs here, except for the Legato, where I find the Legato to be the least detailed of all of them. We'll talk about that. The bass on the Quartet is the second least textured after the Legato. The Legato has the worst textured bass out of all of these. Then you're going to have the Quartet, which I find to have not necessarily poor texture in the bass, but not good in comparison to the other IEMs, where it has a good quantity for somebody who wants to listen to EDM or something like that, just a very fun sound. This is more, this is less, what do you call it? What's a good way to say it? Yes, accurate sound. It's much more colored. It colors the sound a lot more than the Ikko does, in my opinion. And there is more bass on the Quartet, like quantity-wise, than the Ikko. But you're going to get a lot better quality bass on the Ikko and on the Rinko and on the Hexa. Now, talking about the Hexa, actually, I'm skipping over the Legato for a second. The reason I have the Hexa here, because I know it's not a Basshead iem, so people are like, why the hell do you have this here? The reason is because it has really good texture in the bass, is what I find for the price. At least in my opinion, I think this has great texture. It doesn't have the quantity of any of these. It has the lowest quantity by far. But it does have bass presence, and it has great texture and detail in the bass. So if you're not necessarily looking for a high quantity, but you want great like quality bass, this is good for you. So if you're like, if you're one of those bassists who's more, I want the quality of the bass, but without the overwhelming quantity. I mean, not necessarily these are all overwhelming, but you want less quantity of this bass, but you want the great quality bass. The Hexa is a great option. Anyway, going to the Legato. I do not like the Legato, as I posted in my review last week, probably. I think I'm uploading this now. This is just, it's very boomy bass. It is more bass than the Ikko. I think this probably has the most bass out of anything here, except maybe the Rinko competes for the more, almost as much bass as the Legato. Legato has probably like the, if not the most bass, the second most bass. Here, plentiful amount, but just not good quality. You do get pretty average mid-range and average highs. I prefer the highs on the Legato than on the what's it called? Damn, Ikko, because the Ikko has some peaks in it that I just can't deal with. As I said, like sometimes just I don't like it. This doesn't have those peaks. It's a much flatter sound for the mid-range and the highs on the Legato, but it's also a little bit boring outside of the bass. The bass is just muddy. I really don't like the Legato, as you can tell. Anyway, I do also want to say, go back into the Rinko. The Rinko has a much higher quantity of bass than the Ikko. I don't know if I mentioned that. The quantity of bass on the Rinko is not only higher, it's also a little bit more enveloping. Now, on the Ikko, you're getting a very, localized bass, which is great for imaging, fantastic for imaging. But I think for musicality, I think I prefer the way the bass is presented on the Rinko. It's a unique presentation that you don't get really on many other IMs. That it's not boomy, but it's enveloping the back of the song almost, surrounding the song in like a bass that is also has texture. Okay, but it's not boomy, and it has a high quantity, but it doesn't go in front of the vocalist necessarily. Where this has more of a localized spot where the bass is happening, which, if the track demands for, obviously the Rinko can do that. It localizes the bass to the area. But, if there's like a background, like a beat, the Rinko has a really interesting way of just like, having a great presence, a very large sounding bass. Anyway, but also does have the smallest sound stage of the bunch. I think the Rinko has the smallest stage out of all of these. The widest stage is the OH10. The second widest probably the Quartet. The third widest is probably the Legato, then the Hexa, and then the Rinko. Legato and Hexa are probably tied, but yeah, so I think that the Hexa has a wider stage than the Quartet. The Quartet has a much taller stage though, so I think that the Quartet does win out on staging than these. But in terms of width, you will get a good width on the Hexa. Anyway, but I do want to focus more on these than the Hexa because these are the bass IMs. I just wanted to bring these up for the quality of the bass is quite nice. Now, let's see, am I missing anything? Your vocalist. I do want to talk, of course, about other things other than bass and vocalist. Vocalist-wise, I think that you're going to get best vocalist on probably the Rinko, in my view, because the Rinko has that fullness to it. Then the Quartet and the Ikko, and then the Legato is last. Except the upper mids, where like some female vocalists does get a little peaky on the Ikko. And so I prefer having the flatness of the Legato than the peaky upper mid-range of the Ikko. I know I keep bringing that up, but it is like, it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. It is like definitely like listenable and enjoyable. It's just something that I do not like. Other than that, I think that that's everything. I covered this faster than I thought. Let me quickly go over highs, I guess. As I said, the highs, little peaks, rolled off highs, just normal amount of highs, and then normal amount of highs, very flat sounding. Very, not exciting. No sparkle on these ones. This one is warmer sound, but it still has good presence in the highs. This one has good highs, pretty average, and this one has a little bit of peakiness in the highs, but it does have that sparkle that the other ones don't have. It does have a sparkle to the highs in certain songs where it does not get those peaks. I think that the Ikko OH10 is still worth it now in 2023. Even though it has some flaws, it is a very good set. And even though it's been so long, the price drop made these still worth it. I think that these used to be $200. I'm not sure. But at $100, these are worth it. For me personally, out of all of these, my favorite is the Rinko. But that's for me. And I hope this helped out with making a decision between the plentiful amount of IEMs we have now in the current day. New ones coming out every second. I can't catch up. Anyway, I hope this helped out. See ya.